Guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, September 29th, 2025, and today we are going to be taking a look at the 2026 gubernatorial elections based off polling data in every single state. I realized when I made a video about this back earlier on this month talking about the Senate races, I felt like the governor races were ones that we needed to do a little bit closer to the election. But I realized that maybe we could actually track this polling data every single month. We've done it in previous election cycles, and I figured that as we got closer to the end of the year, we would start to see a huge set of real data points coming in a variety of different races, safe Republican races, safe Democratic races, toss-up races, whatever it might be, that could prove to be interesting to cover as we get closer and closer to the end of this cycle and straight into the midterm one. Now on your screen right now are 36 races, but there are actually 38 races that will be decided by 2026, and that means right now 2 races in New Jersey and Virginia are have yet to be decided, that will be decided this coming November in just about 35 days. Those 2 races right now, Democrats have a lead of about a likely Democratic margin, anywhere between 5 to 10 points across the 2 states here. But looking at our overall 2026 races here, we have far more to get through, far more to talk about, and ones that would be surprisingly quite interesting and might actually surprise you relative to what you would expect given the battleground or safe nature of some of these states. So not every single state has polling data when it comes down to it. A lot of these states are obviously safe on either side of the aisle, and polls actually cost anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 if they're done right and done high quality. Some cases even more, depending on the firm that does them. And so, it is not easy to get data out of these states, especially since we're not in this Obama era, George W. Bush era of electoral politics where states really can have drastically different governors and senators than how they might vote on the presidential level. So a lot of the times we don't see much investment in terms of polling in a lot of these states. So to just get that out of the bat, off the bat here, we're going to talk about all of these states, the ones that don't have any real substantive polls. We are going to go ahead and just take the average of what the ratings are, skewed a little bit more towards the incumbent party, based off, so the race ratings are going to be the determinant if there is no polling data in the state right now. And so that actually should give us a characterization for all but one state on the map here, which puts us in a pretty good position. So as we start off on our maps here, as we do normally, we talk about the states that are safe for the GOP and safe for the Democratic Party. Now, for a bit of orientation as to where we are on the map here, the 2022 midterm elections looked like this. Democrats were winning in all of the states that are currently blue on your screen right now, and Republicans were, of course, winning in all of the states that were considered red on the map right now. And so we haven't seen anything change in terms of how these states have voted in recent history. Obviously, the presidential election looked a little bit different than the 2022 midterms did, but 2026, believe it or not, is going to be quite interesting because there are going to be some races here that were competitive in 2022 that may not be as competitive in 2026, which is why the margins really, really do matter. So we're going to start off by characterizing all of the states that we consider to be safe. 15 points or more for either political party, Democrats and Republicans, and there are arguably quite a few of them. Now, the polling data, like I said, in these safe states is a lot less common than you think, just because nobody really wants to waste the money on polling a state like California when we know Democrats are going to do well there. There actually is a good amount of polling because it is the largest state for the jungle primary. But in terms of an eventual head-to-head hypothetical, I think a lot of these firms are waiting until you actually see that come to reality before they jump the gun on these races. So California sort of spoiled that one, safe for the Democratic Party, but joining with it are Hawaii, Colorado, believe it or not, Illinois, Oregon, Rhode Island. These are all states that right now are considered to be safe for the Democratic Party, Massachusetts, and New York. Now, New York is actually the only one that really jumps out to me as interesting. I'm not really shocked by Colorado. Kamala Harris won the state by 11, and 2026 is certainly going to be 4 points more to the left than 2024, so I can imagine Colorado could be anywhere from a 16 to 18 point margin based on our estimations. But New York is a state that Kathy Hochul only won by 6 in 2022. So thinking about how much it has gone for being a state the Democrats actually were quite worried about, she has certainly won back droves and droves of support across the state, really solidifying in her margin here. New York is a safe Democratic state. Now, for the Republicans, they have a few more states that we can characterize as safe for their political party. We'll start off with the ones that are more expected, states like Idaho and Wyoming and South Dakota. Obviously makes a lot of sense here. Nebraska, Arkansas, Alabama. So as we get through them, right, these are not ones that should shock you. They're not ones. Oklahoma, for instance, was a little bit more competitive in 2018 and 2022. We're not going to see that happen this time around, especially since Ryan Walter, the superintendent, who is widely expected to run for governor, is now not seeking any office and actually leaving his time in office as state superintendent. So it doesn't look like he's going to go for much further. South Dakota looks like that's there. Wyoming, safe for the Republican Party. Texas, believe it or not, safe for the Republican Party right now. There is no actual real polling data in the state, probably because there's no major Democrats who have announced that they want to run. But Greg Abbott, based off the estimations here, is in a safe position. The final three states, or two states actually, Tennessee is not really the shocker here. The final two states might actually surprise you as states that are straight off the dome, being safe for the Republican Party, and they're not the states you might expect. It's not Kansas, it's not Alaska, it's not even Florida, Iowa, or Ohio. It's the state of Vermont and the state of Nevada. Now, these are two states where, Vermont actually doesn't have any polling data in the state, believe it or not. I actually do believe it. It's one of the smaller states in the country, but it is largely contingent on whether or not the incumbent Republican governor, Phil Scott, Phil Murphy's down in Jersey, decides to run for re-election as one of the most popular governors in the country. He's a Republican, yes, but outperformed Harris, outperformed Biden, outperformed Clinton, in 2018, did very, very well in the state. Vermont is a red state when it comes down to gubernatorial races, and it's not going to change in 2026. Over in Nevada, this is the one that I think really might shock many Democrats because Aaron Ford, the state's attorney general, who has won elections statewide before, is running for governor in 2026, but chances are he's not going to be in a great position based on what the data is telling us, that Aaron Ford is only, but down 21 points across the state. Obviously, a lot will change. I imagine it will be much closer, but the only data point we really have in Nevada right now suggests that it is safe for the Republican Party. So that brings Republicans to about 12 seats here in terms of, total safe states across the map. Democrats are at just 8. Thinking about where we are in the remaining 16 races, a lot of it is really going to boil down to these lean, likely, and tilt states. And there's some on here that actually might take you by surprise. I think the ones that are the most surprising to me are maybe states like Connecticut that are on here, states like Maryland that are on here, even some of the Republican states like Florida and Alaska. But let me be clear about this, from the beginning. A lot of these states are likely because the governor elections historically have actually been quite close. When you take a look at recent elections like 2022, but let's say 2018 is a better example, the national environment was a little bit better for Democrats in 2018 than in 2022 and probably more replicating. 2026 will look a lot more like 2018 than 2022. But thinking about states even like Connecticut, was decided for Ned Lamont by 3.2%. 3.2% in a state that Obama, Biden, Clinton, Harris all won by double digits in every single election. It was narrow in 2018, right? Maryland, my home state, was won by the Republican, potential contender in 2026, Larry Hogan, by 12 points, despite it being a very strong year for the National Democratic Party. So when you think about it, it actually isn't all that shocking that these states have narrowed down to being likely across the board here. But it doesn't mean that the opposition party is likely to win them. Democrats start out in the likely position in Connecticut and also in Maryland. This is a hypothetical between Larry Hogan and Wes Moore. I imagine without Larry Hogan in the race, this is a 30-point race for the Democratic Party. Another one that might surprise you on the Republican side is the state of New Hampshire, because right now Kelly Ayotte is the incumbent Republican governor in the state. She's in a pretty strong position when it comes down to what the race ratings say, and also her data from 2024 largely expected and predicted a closer margin than what was actually the reality on Election Day when Joyce Craig lost that race to Kelly Ayotte by a pretty wide margin. We're talking about nearly 9 points here. And so thinking about, 2026, even though it is a strong year for the Democratic Party, see 2018, Chris Sununu also won by roughly 7 points, and Phil Scott won by 14.9, went on to win by even more in 2020. But thinking about it right now, New Hampshire likely for the Republican Party. The next few states that are going to be characterized as likely for both parties, we have to see. Alaska is likely for the GOP, but that is if Mary Peltola does not run. If she does run, Alaska will become immediately a state that is a toss-up, if not leaning towards the Democratic Party. But until that happens right now, Nancy Dahlstrom leads the GOP pack and is expected to beat Tom Begich in the hypothetical data in the state by double digits right now, but a lot can change between now and Election Day 2026. This is just simply where the race stands today. And so that brings me over to the next state that's likely for the GOP, the state of Ohio. Now, I'm not really shocked. Vivek Ramaswamy is one that the Republicans have been quite excited about, but he's right now running against Amy Acton. No data points out of there when it comes down to Tim Ryan, save one poll here, and even then he's beating him by a pretty substantive margin. Not double digits, but certainly not exactly where you want to be as a Democrat in Ohio. Ohio, Alaska, and New Hampshire all likely for the GOP. Democrats have their fair share of likely states too. I already showed you Maryland and Connecticut, but they also have Minnesota. Tim Walz set to run for a third term, just announced that he's probably going to win that race. Maine and New Mexico, two races where there's going to be an open race. The incumbent governors cannot run for re-election. That's Janet Mills in Maine. And let me think. Michelle Lewin Grisham in the state of New Mexico, I believe. Let's double check that 22 result. Yes, it is. That race is also going to be Deb Haaland over there from the Biden admin. And so these states right now are likely for the Democratic Party. The final state to really join this bunch as a likely Democratic state is the state of Pennsylvania, where Josh Shapiro does not look like he's going to be facing any strong Republican contenders, and it doesn't look like the race ratings expect much from that race either. Democrats jumping up to 14 across the states, 15 for the GOP. And so that brings us down to these remaining races here: Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, Arizona, all states you should recognize from 2024, and then 3 additional ones: Iowa, Kansas, and Florida. Now, Democrats are not exactly within striking distance in all of these states. They are, within competitive enough territory. But it doesn't necessarily mean, for instance, Florida, which you might be shocked to see not as likely and not as safe. I think a lot of the times this is a product of low name ID and not the most amazing polls. But Florida right now actually comes into this as a lean Republican state. My expectation is that it is easily a double-digit state for the GOP, but we might be shocked in 2026. After all, the year will be much more favorable to the Democratic Party than we might think. So that actually leaves us with the remaining races that I actually do think Democrats are within striking distance of the remaining ones. All of them were toss-ups in 2024, save Iowa and Kansas. Thinking about where they were in 2022, well, this was a race pretty strong for the GOP in 22, but when it came down to Kansas, Democrats actually won it. That was one where Laura Kelly defeated Derek Schmidt in the race. Derek Schmidt's now in Congress. But this race, Kansas and Iowa, are ones that in 2026 are largely being led as more competitive by the nature of strong Democratic candidates rather than weak Republican ones. Which is a pretty huge change from, the past, where you had seen that a lot of the times it was bad Republicans driving down the odds at victory for their own political party. This time, Rob Sand in Iowa, and we'll see what happens in Kansas, though Laura Kelly, the incumbent Democrat, her popularity really helps the party, has already made an endorsement and really pushed out this race. So 6 remaining races here. Let's rip off the Band-Aid for 4 of them that are in the lean column. This is anywhere where the margin is between 1 to 5 points here. That's Iowa for the GOP, Kansas for the GOP, and that is Arizona for the Democrats, and Michigan for the Democrats. Now, if you don't know much about these races, I will say this: Iowa, the only statewide elected Democrat, is running for governor in this race. Pretty good for the Dems. Kansas, the lieutenant governor opted not to run. It doesn't look like the Sharice Davids, the Democratic representative from Kansas, is also probably not going to run in that race unless they completely redraw the map there, which I don't imagine is going to happen. Kansas and Iowa right now, again, Democrats have well within the possibility of winning here, but in Michigan and Arizona, far more interesting races. Arizona, Donald Trump has done a double endorsement on the GOP side, can't make up his mind. Both of them probably going to lose. Michigan, a third-party candidate here, the incumbent mayor of Detroit, pulling a lot from the Democratic side, breaking down Michigan from what might be a likely state like it was in 2018 and 2022 for the Dems, down to being just a lean margin. So, let's take a look. Democrats at 16, Republicans at 18, these final 2 races, Georgia and Wisconsin. What's interesting about them? Well, Wisconsin is the true toss-up. That's the one we don't have any substantive polling data out of the state, and the race ratings all say toss-up, 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 toss-up. Not one organization has rated Wisconsin as lean for the Democrats or lean for the Republicans, which puts us in a position where it's difficult to make that characterization on our own, but I'm going to leave it as a toss-up. Georgia, on the other hand, is on the verge of being a toss-up as well, but right now, it is the Republicans who have the slight upper hand here. When it comes down to the list of Democratic candidates for Republican, for the Democratic nomination, it doesn't look amazing for the Democratic Party. It's all over the place, of a lot of contested races and a lot of interesting ones at that. Keisha Lance Bottoms leads the pack here right now, though. Georgia stands to be a tilt Republican state, given that they have about a lean characterization on one end, and the rest are toss-up, bringing the Republicans up to 19 and the Democrats at 16. In terms of overall changes on the map here, Kansas is a flip for the Republican Party from the Democrats. Nevada is a hold for the Republicans here. They won it in 2022, but by a much narrower margin. Arizona looks like it's a little bit more advantageous for the Democrats than 2022 and especially 2024. Michigan's a hold, Pennsylvania's a hold, Georgia is a hold for the GOP. Not much else is changing here. Wisconsin might be the only one. Iowa's interesting, Ohio's interesting, but across the board here, a very similar map to the 2022 midterm elections. Not the best for the Democratic Party, but also not the worst. The numbers here don't lie. The Democrats are in a position where they are within competitive range of some of these states. But as it stands today, the Republicans seem to come out with the net ahead across the board here relative to the last midterm cycle. But a lot can change between now and November of 2026. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, then a playlist for my 2026 governor election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.